quick secret. A lot of it was also not very good. we did some things I look at it, oh my God, that was terrible. How did we do that? Oh no.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Before we get into today's episode, I will ask you for maybe the usual favor, but if you're a new listener, a new follower, it would be really appreciated if you can rate or review this or any episode. You can subscribe to That's What I Call Marketing and follow our episodes, get notifications when new episodes land. It is getting harder and harder. All the algorithms want us to pay, so it gets harder and harder for us to reach audiences. So by you sharing episodes, liking, rating, reviewing, all of that great stuff, it really does help us continue to grow the podcast and reach even more amazing people just like you who are curious and interested about marketing. Well, listen, on to today's episode. And really, I've said before, some people need no introduction. This guest literally needs no introduction. Today's episode is with the iconic, the legendary, the wonderful Sir John Hegarty. Well, Sir John, thank you so much for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
It's lovely to be here, Conor. By the way, it's John when you're,
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with that because I've never even spoken to someone who's been knighted before. What was that like, getting that call and going, you're a knight?
It was otherworldly, is the only way I can describe it. And somebody said to me, because you were asked, would you like your name to be put forward?
Yeah.
You to be, and then it's up to, it was then the Queen, obviously this was 2007, to actually say, yes, I accept this man as a knight. So you can't, you have to first of all say, I would like to be considered for it. And somebody said to me, did you think about it? And I said, for about a trillionth of a second, because I thought my mother, sadly, was no longer with us. If she had known I had turned it down, that would have been it, So it was a surreal experience, but I kind of did it for the kind of the creative industries, because I was the first person in advertising to be knighted. People forget Martin Sorrell was knighted for services to marketing. I was knighted for services to advertising. And it was a creative person. So I felt kind of, it's a recognition that creativity is what our industry is about. So I accepted it. But it was great. It was really good.
Well, an amazing and, an honor for me to speaking to someone who has been knighted. Well, in lots of other ways, it's an honor to speak to you. But I just that's amazing.
Yeah.
My uncle lived in London. And when I was young, he ran restaurants in London, and I used to always think he'd be knighted because he was the only person I knew that was in business in London as a kid, and he'd be like, "What? I'm not getting knighted."
How lovely.
It was a higher bar. We do want to talk about the business of creativity, but before we do, I do want to touch on some of your phenomenal career, amazing, and as I said to you before we started, you've written about it. It's well documented, but there were some things in there I was just interested to ask you a little bit about. I mean, I know when you talk about your first job and that you were 18 months in and you got fired, and when I was reading that, I was like, for a lot of people, that could have been the moment that just totally derailed you, that you were just like, okay, this isn't for me. How did you kind of realize that it was for you, and that moment was almost kind of a push you forward moment?
Yeah, it was difficult, actually, because it was a very difficult moment in my career, because back then, and I'm now talking 1965, 66, there was a great belief that you had to be trained for 3 or 4 years before you could go from one stage to the next. It's far more egalitarian today, and, has been for a very, very long time. So there was a real danger that I hadn't gained enough experience to move to the next level. And that was concerning. But I always used to sort of laugh to myself, is that and I've always said, I am actually a testament to how failure is a path to success. And, I failed art O-level when I took it. And then I failed to get into the London College of Printing first time I applied, and then had to reapply. And then got fired from my first job. So I had three great failures that I kind of then overcame, I suppose you could say. So I always used to sort of laugh to myself that I am a monument to failure and how it can be a part of success. So it was tough, but in the end, I was surrounded by great people, and I knew what I was doing was right.
Right.
I didn't have doubts. I didn't suddenly go, if I was a musician, nobody wanted to listen to this kind of music, or, if I was a sports person, I'm just not able to deliver. I knew that what I was creating, the way I was thinking was the right way. And I had lots of examples of it around me. And it was just about persistence. Stay with it. Don't give up. Don't give up.
And it is about, like, I remember when I was in an agency once and I was let go, and when I was leaving, the guy said, you're not made for this industry. And I was like, really? No, I was older at that time because I'd been through many iterations of my career. So I think I had the self-belief, but I just think at that young age to have that confidence is a great, I think it's a great thing for people to know that knockbacks aren't, they don't have to be kind of complete failures. They can just reset you and go forward. And then you kind of famously with Pregnant Man and that creative, and you've said that it was criticized by David Ogilvy. I'll say that right. And you said that criticism, you almost enjoyed it. How did that give you energy? Was it the fact that it was being noticed, or?
I think actually it's knowing that actually you're annoying certain people and you're getting under their skin. I think it's actually quite good. I mean, I really genuinely like the fact that certain people thought what I was doing was rubbish. I mean, all the people I liked and the people I respected, we all kind of were going in the same direction.
Right. Yeah.
So it didn't, but the fact that certain people disliked it intensely, I thought actually in many ways was proof that what we were doing was right, because they just couldn't see it. They didn't get it. They didn't understand. And I think the other thing about advertising, and I think I said this in my book, is that, of course, I came into the industry in the 60s. It sounds terrifying when you say it now, but people look at you and go, when was that? A century ago. And, but of course, the whole Cultural Revolution, what was happening. But of course, it was happening from the ground up. I thought what was really significant about the 60s, it was the first time, in a way, a cultural revolution came from the ground up. Most, prior to that, most cultural revolutions came from the top down. It was the very first time that happened. So, I came from a very working class background, and, the stuff I liked was the fashion, music, the art that was happening. And it was all very kind of working class people being able to have a voice and showing this is the way the world's going. The problem with advertising was it's controlled by corporations.
Right.
By and large, about 10 years behind anything, didn't realize this revolution is going on and didn't know how to respond to it. So it took advertising some time for it to catch up with, this is what the people want. And, but we knew it was happening. It was coming. We could see it.
It's not, and it is interesting. And again, the kind of big organizations tend to be slow, and it's obviously so different now where everything's at the speed of 3 seconds. But the fact that, advertising now is so creative and can create culture, which you went on to do in many, many ways.
It's still subject, however, and I would say this, to the kind of the vagaries and the kind of the bureaucracy of large organizations, because they're the ones with the budgets. In fact, the talk I gave at Cannes this year was titled "Why Giants Can't Dance." And I think with the development of AI, now we're jumping forward, but we'll go back for it. But with the development of AI, I mean, it's going to democratize opportunity. Yeah. And actually, it's really going to be a problem, I think, now for large organizations. But back 1960s and then into the 70s, the creative revolution didn't really happen in advertising, certainly in the UK, until the 70s. And I knew it was happening because I had this wonderful aunt, my mother's sister, who lived in Harpenden. Now, for your listeners, viewers, watchers, whatever, Harpenden is Middle England. It is just so kind of, there are probably more copies of the Daily Mail sold in Harpenden than anywhere else in the UK. And anyway, it was my auntie who said to me, I'd gone to see her, and she said to me, John, did you do that Hovis ad, the one where the boy goes up the hill, pushing his bike up the hill, so that lovely music? And I said, actually, no, I didn't. That was actually done by an agency called Colin Dickinson Pierce and was shot by Ridley Scott. And she said, John, you should do more advertising like that. And I realized the creative revolution had happened.
Amazing.
My auntie confirmed it. But it was great, that. And I think I say here, certainly in the UK, I mean, I think, I've always said there are two great advertising agencies. Dorday and Bernbach came out of New York, because Bernbach, in a sense, defined the kind of modern advertising. He gave it meaning. He gave it a kind of a philosophy and understanding. And then CDP, Colin Dickinson Pierce in the UK, took it to the people.
Right.
I think that was their great contribution, because we learned from America.
Yeah, I love that. Bringing it to the people. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of
it's very interesting with any piece of culture, whatever it is, whether you're in the theatre, you're in music, you're in the film industry, you're a novelist, whatever. It's how do you get the public? How do you get people to buy into it? We can all do esoteric work that 25 people see, and in 100 years' time, people will go, that was truly profound. Well, what's the point? It is only worth it if I've actually communicated and advanced people's awareness, their understanding, their appreciation, whatever it is. And of course, that's advertising's great skill. Its job is to reach out. As virtually all creative thinking, creative work is reaching out. Nobody writes a book and goes, well, I only want 25 people to read this. They want as many people in the world as possible to read it. So, but advertising is built on that, and it teaches you how to understand and create ideas that not only have depth to them and have a kind of profundity to them, but also they're easy to understand.
Yeah, and look, without getting into all of the work that you've done that has actually done that, and so much of it is not just written about by you, but by others. Obviously, famously, the Levi's work certainly did that, and a very good friend of mine, Paul Dervin, who's a marketer, he's a really talented guy. But I interviewed him for this podcast really early on, and he said that work was the work that made him want to get into advertising. So it moved people, it had that profound effect.
And you don't know at the time, of course. That's the other great thing. People always said to me, John, you're aware that it was going to... No.
Were you not?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I think with anything, I mean, obviously you think you've written something that's great. Anybody who says, yes, I realize that they're talking bullshit. Everything you do, you hope is going to do something, but you don't go, this is definitely it. And the reason why is I think there's a kind of magic that happens, and I did title my book, Turning Intelligence into Magic. And it's like if you're writing a book and composing a piece of music, why does one piece of music capture? What does it got? What is it?
Yeah.
Why does that work? But we definitely didn't. And I always tell the story, and I say, in actual fact, when we launched that campaign, Laundrette in Bath, in 1980, we made it in 1984. It launched in 1985. We had two scripts, Bath and Laundrette. Now, if the client had come to us and said, we've just looked at budgets and, things are a bit tough, we can only make one, which one should we make? I can promise you there was a very, very large percentage of people who said, make Bath.
Really?
Yeah. And now deep down, I would have gone Laundrette. I know that. But actually, so it goes to show how much luck there is in things without you realizing it. And of course, they didn't. We made both. Nobody talks about Bath. Everybody talks about Laundrette.
Yeah.
And it had a kind of, there was a storytelling within it that you didn't quite realize at the time, but the more it happened, and I think that often happens with great ideas, you have this idea and you don't realize that it's got a kind of profundity to it, that you kind of were being made aware of as it was made and as you did it. And I'm not in any way religious or anything like that, but there is a kind of a spirituality in a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm, as I say, I'm not in any way, please, religious from my point of view, rubbish. But I don't disagree that there is a spirituality. What is it? Why did that idea capture?
And also like kind of where did it come from, the inspiration, like, do you know what I mean? There's so much to that, like that inspiration, all the bits that come together, even the moments where you had to go to use boxer shorts, and then that kind of revolutionized underwear.
And of course, the lovely story, which is that, again, I've told 1,000 times, but which is that in the original script, he was in white fronts. Now, those are what men wore back in, and the authorities here that have to approve scripts because it has to be legal, decent, honest, and all that sort of stuff, said, no, this is indecent, the man to get it. And we said, but they're just like a pair of Speedos, And they came back and said, well, if he was wearing boxer shorts, that would be okay. And we all kind of went, boxer shorts? Dreadful kind of garments they used to wear Americans used to wear in the 40s, But anyway, story is we did it and bang, and there we are. And suddenly everybody started wearing boxer shorts. So,
for decades.
It's gone wrong, doesn't it? If only.
If you had a percent of that.
I think the great thing for me was it rejuvenated a whole style of music that had been forgotten. And again, I remember, Stalking Aikman Waterman, who were music writers and were very critical of what we were doing. One of them was, he said, well, we would never allow our music to be used in advertising, and why they're using these old songs and stuff like that. And what they hadn't realized, actually, and I sensed it was the case that, call it rock and roll, call it popular music, whatever you want to call it, now had a history. It now had a history. This is 1984, and people had forgotten people like Marvin Gaye. Who was Marvin Gaye? This great music that actually infected, the music of the day had been forgotten, and we brought it back. And it was one of those absurd things. I thought, well, nobody would have, if we'd put a piece of Mozart, nobody would have said, Mozart, well, he died 300 years ago. Why are you using Mozart? It was that stupid misunderstanding of what we were trying to do, which was, crazy.
Yeah, and then that trio then went on to create, Kylie with the Locomotion. They had Robson and Jerome, who mostly so maybe they should reflect a bit on.
Exactly.
They made him a lot of money.
People. I just think it's very interesting, and if we're talking now to anybody who's listening to this who is in the world of marketing, there is a kind of paranoia about being, are we modern? Are we of today? As opposed to, do we have something with integrity?
Yeah.
And if you have something with integrity, there's a kind of power to that actually people forget. And they sort of think, well, young people aren't interested in history. No, they are, if you express it in the right way. Brands have proven that again and again and again and again. I remember we pitched for Adidas way back in the early 90s when the company was virtually, collapsing. And we didn't win it, but actually went on to become a hugely successful brand. And they partly did it by going back to where they came from and reissued stuff and reminded people of their heritage. And suddenly it took off. And that's a fashion brand. So your heritage is fundamentally important, but express it with integrity and with, interest and entertainment, and you can have success.
And like there's for me, there's two things in that. Like there's the history both of your brand, and you say you can express that in a new and fresh way, but also then I think history of advertising. And you've touched on some of the great advertisers, and I think knowing both can really propel you. It doesn't all have to be net new, right? You know, there's new ways of expressing it.
Well, I always say I had the most fantastic history teacher, and his name was Con O'Halpin. And Con walked into, I remember I was 11 years old. He walked into our class and he says, I'm here to teach you about history. History isn't about the past, it's about the future. And we all went, what? and suddenly he had our attention. Brilliant, brilliant history teacher. But he taught you that, yes, we're going to go into history, but actually it's how we move forward. And again, you know, brands have, if they've got a heritage, that is a strength. Learn how to use it, learn how to project it, learn how to push it forward, because it has real value.
Are there any work like there's obviously a huge amount of examples of great work that you did and so many great clients, but are there any pieces of work that you did or clients that you worked on that are maybe lesser known, lesser talked about, that you're like, that sit with you today is, I love that piece of work?
Yeah, I suppose there are actually. We did a wonderful campaign for a snacks company here in the UK. They were brilliant group of people who got together. They had worked for big snacks companies, and they had developed their own range of snacks, more exotic, you know, so they weren't just potato chips. They were, you know, croutons, and they were all kinds of snacks. And they came to us, and they were called Phileas Fogg.
All right, yeah.
All around the world and all that. And we did a wonderful campaign for them. And we decided that instead of pretending these Californian corn chips came from California, that most brands would do, we would actually say, look, they're made in a place called Medhamsley Road, Consett, County Durham, you know, because otherwise we'd have to put on the screen, made in made in the UK. We said, take that and turn that into an advantage. Don't, you know, deny it. And we did a great campaign for them, and they eventually sold the company to United Biscuits, but they had to keep the factory open because that was the only way they could keep on with the claim made in County Durham. And so I was very proud of that. I thought that's great. The piece of advertising kept those people's jobs.
I was going to say, it
was a lovely campaign. We had great fun with it, and they were brilliant, brilliant clients, brilliant people, and they fundamentally understood that you have to engage, you have to entertain. And they certainly got that. But that's a piece of work that I love. You know, people often say, though, you know, but what about your failures, John? And I said, you know, I've learned nothing from my failures. The only thing I learned from my failures is forget them and move on. And people think, you know, people go, oh, you know, I learned from my failures. You might be if you're a research scientist or you're trying to develop a new drug and you kind of, well, we shouldn't have done everything. But when you're doing what I'm doing, or if you're a novelist, or if you're a film, whatever, and you create something and it hasn't worked, what do? Do you go, oh, that didn't work. Maybe I should go back to what I did that did work. And then if you do that, then you're in a rut.
Because you just do the same thing over and over again.
The same thing over and over again. And you've got to have the courage to go, forget it. It didn't work. I you know, there are things I could say why or who knows, but just keep moving forward. And, you know, so when people often talk to me about that, they say, do you learn from your mistakes? And I say, no, nothing. Because if I sort of focused on mistakes, it would just, in a way, compromise my thinking for being daring. Because you've got to be daring. You've always got to you're trying to break new ground. You're trying to stand out. You're trying to be different.
Yeah.
Which is, after all, what a brand is supposed to be. Why have we got, you know, 20 different brands of jeans? Because they're supposed to all be different. Otherwise, why have 20? You know, let's just have 5 and make it easier. So being different is fundamentally important.
I often kind of think that creative people are almost like the striker, not on the team, because, you know, but in the sense of the confidence piece. Because you see it in football. If a striker isn't scoring goals, they start to get into their own head and then they don't score goals. But I always found the same with creatives. It was that this is great, you know, it's going well. And then when things aren't going great, it's kind of, how do you move on with them, because like that rut, as you say, it can be really hard to get out of.
Totally. I mean, I think there is a kind of, you just have to be really, really confident. You have to go, I absolutely believe in it, even though there's a little voice in the background saying, "You're really sure, John? You're really sure?" I mean, I remember that when with Levi's again, and we wanted a different kind of hero. And they said, well, we've done all these heroes. It's all getting a bit, sort of obvious, and maybe we should do two people. Maybe it's about a relationship, not just a hero being a hero. I mean, so that's interesting. I mean, long story, we came up with Flat Eric.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, and I said, look, this is what I think we should do. And people around me going, at the agency going, John, are you sure about this? I mean, it's a puppet. I mean, we're Levi's. And I said, no, it will be absolutely great. But in the back of my
What if they're right?
Oh, John, are you sure? Oh, but you've got to have the confidence, and you've got to be prepared that you're going to be wrong at times, and you've got to get back up and go at it again. But it does, I think your analogy with a sports player, with a footballer, is a really good one. And that striker has got to believe that when they get the ball, it's going in the net. This ball's going in the net. There's no question about it. And the moment they doubt that, it's all over.
Was there testing and stuff? Like, because now testing such a huge part, and pre-testing and post-testing and testing the testing and all that. Was that part of that? Like, to say Flat Eric, like, was there then? Well, we'll go do consumer testing before we go live with this, or
there was testing, but we were very fortunate with Levi's that in fact they didn't test it. Had they tested it, it would have undoubtedly failed. Undoubtedly. I can guarantee it right now. I mean, testing is, we just have to accept it. It's a bit like bad weather. Yeah. You're going to get bad weather. It's just how you get through it. Put on the right clothing. And as Billy Connolly says, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing or wrong clothing. It's there. It's a part of life. You just have to accept it. And I mean, some of my greatest successes have failed in testing. Yeah. I mean, when we did Audi and we wanted to end it with Wush from Dirk's Technic, the client that time, this is now 1983, tested it. And the research came back and said, under no circumstances, don't do it. Germany, the war, don't do that. All that usual stuff. Unfortunately, I had two great clients at Audi, Brian Bowler and Johnny Mazzaros, and they said, but we are a German brand. We've got, and Audi, the problem with Audi was that everybody thought it was a sort of car made in Belgium or something like that, because it wasn't a very German sounding name. So they went, no, we should do it. And the rest, of course, is history. The trick, and this is what testing can't measure, is humor. It can't cope with humor. And of course, if you test something without that element of humor within it, then people just take it very dryly and I don't get that. Yeah. And of course, if you're doing something different, which is the point of a brand, it's very difficult for them to judge it, because they will judge it on what they know. So, as I say, testing is like bad weather. It's always going to be there. Get on with it. Try and put on the right clothing and deal with it in the right way.
Yeah, take what you have to as well. Like, let it be directional. And I know some great.
It's nonsense, because I always say, people say to me, it's like data. It's data, right? Fine, okay, yeah. And I say, no data went into James Dyson making a bagless vacuum cleaner. No data went into the making of the iPhone. No data went into Tesla. None whatsoever. There was a fundamental belief. So if you want to build a great brand, you want exponential growth, put the data away and trust what you believe in. That's what will make a success. Now, I would say that if I'm making fruit juices, right? I'm making fruit juices and, the team go, hey, we need another fruit juice. There's got to, what are we going to do? I would look at the data to say, well, what fruits are people buying today? Is there any really strange ones coming through? And in that way, the data can be helpful. It can help you with incremental progress. But if you're looking at exponential growth, if you're trying to change the way a market feels or thinks, there won't be data on it. There won't be, because you're trying to change something. This idea that, we're going to have a world, driven by data and algorithms and that. Of course, there are all kinds of nerdy left brain people who think that's the way forward, and who could read a balance sheet and do very little else. They'll go on doing it. And gradually we'll just, we'll go into decline. It's visionary to change things.
Yeah. And isn't that one of the challenges of marketing today, right? And I was looking at something this morning that said, I can't remember where it was from, but it was CMOs want risk and bravery and all that kind of stuff. And CFOs want caution.
Yeah.
And we live in this world of quarterly cycles, weekly cycles sometimes on performance. And for a marketer, it can be very challenging to kind of go in and say, we should be more creative.
It's very difficult. It's unbelievably difficult because, as you quite rightly say, the reporting cycles have become so sort of rapid that there's no chance to show this is going to work. There's no chance to say I am growing the brand. But I kind of feel that there are many ways brands could be doing things differently. In the sense of, I understand that. Again, it's like bad weather. It's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Deal with it. So why are we doing more experimentation? Why are we doing things on TikTok to say, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to just put this out there and see what happens and go, look, see, that really works. Now let's take it to a broad audience. It's like, if you look at the fashion world doesn't go, right, these are the jeans, that's it, or this is the coat, this is the color, I'm going to make it in the millions and sell it. No, they do a catwalk. And they put that in, they do that, and they get from that a feeling for, people really like that, or that resonated, or that came across really quite well. And we don't do that in marketing. We don't sort of like experiment. We don't let's try something. And today, with technology, with the ability to do things at a very, very cheap rate, you could be doing this. Like a drug company, it goes out and it goes, right, well, we're going to research all these different avenues, and then hopefully out of them, one is going to happen. They don't just back one, they back a number of them.
Yeah.
And the trouble in marketing, for me, it's kind of living in the 60s, and we're in the 25s or whatever you want. And it's not using what you've got around it to kind of go, let's try it. Let's see if that works. And I think it's, you've just got to accept the way the world is and try and work with it. It's like in sort of the martial arts, it's not like boxing where you try and knock somebody out. You use the opponent's weight. Kind of advance it. And I think marketing should be like that. Use what's out there, try things, develop things, experiment, play, have fun, and bang, out of it will come something.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
It's so funny that you say like marketing is in some ways caught in the 60s. And like by that, do you mean marketing still believes kind of there's one idea and it's just not even the idea, but there's one piece of creative and just that's it. And also with that, maybe I think there's a level of, low risk where people are kind of going, yeah, that's great, but I don't think they'll buy it. I don't think the boss will buy it. And so they don't even bring it. Yeah. Like, is that kind of your viewpoint and where we're at with creativity now?
Yeah. I think I think there's which is why I'm on this thing of the business of creativity. Yeah. We now call my course Creativity for Growth. But, I spent all my years in advertising as an art director, then as a creative director, then as an owner. with people saying to me, well, John, you're creative. Oh, well, I'm not. And I used to say, no, we're all creative.
Yeah.
Because I earn my living by it. And I think one of the great tragedies is that businesses don't understand they are creative constructs. That, if you starting a business is a creative idea, it's what are you going to make? What are you going to do? What's it going to look like? What's it going to sound like, feel like? How are you going to talk to people? All of these are creative acts. So therefore, creativity is at the very core of starting a business. And then as the business goes on, innovation, fundamentally important. Creativity at the heart of innovation. So I spent my career trying to get people to understand this. And it was bizarre in a way that people didn't, people didn't have it. And now, having done the course, we're beginning to get people to understand how important creativity is. And especially now with AI, it's even more important you understand what is creativity, how do you define it, 2 types of creativity, what's at the core of creativity, what drives it. All these things, once you know all these things, you're going to be much better than your competitors.
Yeah.
So I feel that actually we're in a kind of place where the technologists have said, don't need to worry about technology. With my algorithms and data, and I can get to your audience and I can sell them what they want. And of course, the audience is increasingly turning them off.
Yeah.
Because you're just boring them rigid, and I'm famous for saying, I think the new media strategy for companies is stalking. That's your media strategy, stalking. Now, I don't know about whatever country you're in, but in the UK, there is a law about stalking. And I think actually just for fun, I should issue a writ to somebody, who stalked me. I should send them my lawyer's note saying, if you carry on this, I'm going to report you to the police. Stalking is illegal. But that's what they think it is, rather than, I came into advertising at a time when the idea was to create something inspiring that people wanted. Yeah. They looked at it and they said, oh, that's great. We're now in a world where it's about stalking. You don't create something inspiring. You annoy me into trying to buy your product. And I do generally think that can't go. It just, by definition, it can't go. So marketing is going to have to rediscover its creative brain. It's going to have to rediscover its creative heart. And I think, and here's my message to marketing people, is a huge opportunity now with AI, because marketing in the AI world is going to be different. It is going to be different. Marketing is going to change. And it's the marketing director can be the one that says, I understand how AI is going to affect marketing. You've got to listen to me. Otherwise, we are dead. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a moment in time, because when you've got agentic AI, when in fact, everything is going to come to me that I want.
Yeah.
The internet, some people say the internet websites all over, it's all over. Because actually, I'm just going to go, I go onto Perplexity, ask the question, they give me the answer.
Yeah.
So how does the brand impact today's audience? How does it impact that audience? And the marketing director can be that person that says, this is how we do it. Because what's going to happen with agentic AI is it's basically going to go out and it's going to get all the information and it's going to present it to me. So your communication has got to have something in it that AI can take.
Yeah.
The AI can't take, oh, I felt good. Now, feeling good is how I get to me, but then how I get to AI is that I put something within my story that AI goes, oh, I can take that. I understand that. Now, let me explain. BBH actually, in a way, I always used to say this, was a very, very old-fashioned advertising agency. It believed in product demonstration.
Okay.
If you look at it, all our great work, product demonstration, double stitched for extra strength. Audi, 4-wheel drive, whatever it was always and that becomes a very modern piece of advertising, because suddenly what AI will be able to do is be able to say, Audi, 4-wheel drive, performance, better handling on the road, boom. That goes into its understanding that it needs you. The message to me is to make me feel great about the brand, because I've been told that story in a way which is entertaining and therefore engaging. But I engage in a different way to AI.
Yeah.
AI engages logically. I engage emotionally. So your communication has to have both of those things. So sorry, and I'll finish.
No, because this is so interesting.
In time, when we always used to complain, why isn't the CMO on the board?
Yeah.
But after all, the only value in your company is in the brand. But the person who cares and looks after that isn't even on the board. Yeah. Isn't that stupid? Isn't that crazy? Now, the moment has arrived where the CMO can say, I'm the one that understands this, guys, because the rest of you, by and large, could be out of a job.
Yeah.
And if you don't get with the program, this is what's going to happen. And so I think it truly is, Connor, I would say it's a moment in time. And you get these moments. You get these moments when things flip, when, and suddenly a change can occur. So I would be saying to all the marketing people who are watching this and all the ones who want to be marketing directors and say, this is your moment. Grab it.
And what a way to put it. Because one of the things, and I want to get back to the emotion and the logic, but one of the things that has struck me and things I've seen recently with you and read and all that is you're not harking back and saying, oh, it was brilliant then. Like, you have this really sharp view of the opportunity now. And I saw you speak at the event in Dublin, the Marketing Institute CMO event. And it was there the first time I really saw you talk about AI in this world. And I was really struck by that. I was struck by how you aren't saying it was brilliant when I made the TV ads and it was simpler. Yeah. Like, you have this very clear view. And I guess that's why you've set up the business of creativity, because you have this clear view of the path forward for marketers.
I mean, I don't know what it is. Somebody said to me, what? Well, I'm sort of passionate about creativity because I think it is why we're here. Now, actually, whilst I'm doing that, a book I would love everybody to read, it is called Your Brain on Art. And it's written by two wonderful women. One of them is a neuroscientist. And they talk about how actually our brain is wired to be creative. And that the more we understand that, the more we're aware of that, the healthier we are going to be. And they literally equate it in those terms. Right. It's going to, understanding your creativity, understanding how to express it. And I don't mean painting a picture or writing a book or, whatever. Just being aware and understanding it helps you, but your biology. It helps with brain plasticity. It helps with trauma. It helps with stress. They talk about all these things. And so creativity is one of our superpowers. Yeah. The gift we've been given, if we recognize it, we lead better, healthier lives. Not better lives, not just better, healthier lives. And they talk about it in the book. And so I'm lucky in that I, went to art school and then design school, then into it. So I've lived in this creative life and I realize what it can do for you and what it gives you and the meaning it has and how it affects your life. It isn't, I want to be a dentist. It's lovely. It's great. We need dentists, but that it doesn't affect how they spend their weekends, what they do when they go on holiday, how they talk to people, whatever it is. Creativity infects everything. Yeah. And I liken it to sort of, if I'd said to you 60 years ago, well, you wouldn't have been around, Connor, but anyway, if I'd said, I'm going to a gym, all my friends would have looked at me and gone, oh my God, what's happened to John? He thinks he's going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. And as you can see, obviously that didn't work. But now there's a gym on every street corner.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is about to happen with creativity. We're about to understand the value of that, what it gives you to your life, and how it solves so many problems. And I think that's partly why I'm very passionate about it, partly why I really want, and for businesses, why it's fundamentally important that they engage with creativity, because that's how they're going to move forward.
Yeah.
It's how they're going to stay ahead. Innovation, right? It's about creativity.
And when you're maybe on the business of creativity and, because one of the things that strikes me is possibly a large percentage of marketers or maybe senior marketers definitely do get it, but the challenge they have, maybe it's going back to that. I hate saying CFOs because actually I have a CFO that gets it, like completely gets brand and creativity, but it's sometimes the blocker can be within an organization. Like, is the business of creativity, like, are you getting to talk to the MDs, the CEOs, the CFOs, or broader people outside of marketing? Because I feel that that's almost where more part of the change, maybe people up and coming still need it. But I think there's change needed everywhere in a business.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and I'm absolutely honest here. I did do this hoping I would get the CFO. I would get the chairman. I would get the CEO. I'm mostly getting marketing people. Now, that's fine. But because I say now, believe it or not, I didn't know this 2 years ago, of course, I realized that the marketing person is in a phenomenal position.
Right.
And this is the moment you've got to go in when the CFO says, well, I'm not sure, you're dead. You are going to be, in fact, Mr. CFO, your job will go.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need you. I don't need you. Your job is going to go. Really. I mean, it's very interesting. I was talking to a guy who gives talks on AI, and he goes, you go into a room of very senior marketing, very senior management people. And he said, do you think AI is going to take people's jobs? Every hand goes up.
Yeah.
They all go, yep, it's going to take jobs. There's no question about it. Next question. Do you think it's going to take your job? No hands go up.
Yeah.
And he said, it's going to. It's coming for you. So if you're not about imagination, if you're not about how you grow a brand, your job's in serious trouble. So if I was the marketing director, I'd be going to the CEO and the CFO and say, there's a great danger. You guys won't be here in 2 years' time. I'm a believer in that the way you get people to respond and react is they've got to feel the fear.
Yeah.
They've got to feel the fear, because if they don't, they won't do anything. Their complacency is, a very, very soft seat. And people sink into it with great ease. And you can say, guys, it was like, seriously, why have you got a CFO? It's going to do it.
It will do it. Like, it genuinely will, 100%.
So unless you've got visionary skills, unless you've got an appreciation of what you can do with this company, this brand, this product, whatever it is, then you've got to go. And if you don't have that, then you're in serious trouble.
100%. And the interaction, I think, of creativity and AI is very, very interesting. And one of the things I think about, and maybe this is probably what, like, the power of your course as well, is how people have the knowledge, because you need the knowledge of creativity, right? And understanding how to get creativity out of AI tools, right? And so that's a huge part of that moment that we're in now, I think, is understanding that.
It is, definitely. But the best way you do that is, first of all, you understand the principles.
Exactly.
Then you understand how to then implement them. And you'll play. AI lets you play. Have some, I'm sorry if I keep saying the same thing, but have some fun. For God's sake, have some fun. You're selling potato chips. You're selling a bar of soap. You're selling, I don't know what you're selling. You're selling a better way of booking a holiday. You're selling a new type of beer, without any alcohol. Well, I don't know what it is. You're selling a bit of fun, a bit of enjoyment. Right? It used to amaze me that I'd often be dealing with companies that were, for instance, in the hospitality industry. You talk about alcohol or foods and they were all so boring. But you're in the fun business, You're selling a cure for cancer. You're selling, go out and have it. And they were so boring and dull and didn't have any fun. And didn't they? I go back to those wonderful guys who started Phileas Fogg, and they were having fun. They said, it's great. Come on, we're selling bar snacks. Shouldn't it be this is when you're out having an enjoyable time? So let's maybe, it's funny and people want it. And I just don't know. You just don't communicate what it is, the business you're in. I mean, most people are in a kind of fairly frivolous industry in some way or another. The world isn't going to stop if, I don't know, if Cafe Nero collapses tomorrow. I mean, we're all going to go, oh, that's a shame. I'll go to Starbucks. Oh, that's a shame. I'll go to, Cafe Costa, whatever it might be, wherever you are. Got to remember, you are sustained by your ability to engage and entertain people in some shape.
Yeah, and even in categories that aren't like fun. So I'm in insurance, and let's be honest, it's not fun.
It's not fun, but it
can be enjoyable.
Yeah, but you could go. You kind of need it, and I'm going to talk to you in an interesting way.
Exactly.
I mean, people forget that to engage, you have to entertain.
Yeah.
And so even if it's a dry subject, you can do it in a humorous and interesting way and an informative way.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
everybody thinks
your emotion and logic.
Yeah, absolutely. And people forget that. So, it is, but I do genuinely think now that the world we're coming into, and I promise you, the development in AI are going to be exponential. They're not kind of, in 4 years' time, we're talking about months.
100%. Why do people not get this? Sorry. I am absolutely aghast at people who are like, oh, well, maybe next year. I'm like, this isn't next year.
No, tomorrow.
And to talk about fun, I was doing stuff this morning, like thinking about this, and I was like, oh, I wonder, could I create a version of that's what I call marketing, just using the letters and put it in the Levi's brand look and feel, just having fun with AI. I'm so sad. But
I did the talk I gave in Cannes. I think I mentioned this earlier. Was why giants can't dance, and we talked about how large organizations now are in a very, very serious place because AI democratizes opportunity. It's not a tool. It's something you collaborate with to get somewhere better. But large organizations are too slow.
Yeah.
We talked about the ability to move fast. And if you can't move fast, then you can't succeed. And so what I did in the talk, and I talked about founders, about how founders, you can now keep your founder up. Most companies, when the founder dies, goes, retires, whatever, it kind of sort of goes into decline unless you find a way of constantly rejuvenating that. The point I made in my speech is, the Catholic Church didn't go into decline just because Jesus died. It actually understood how to iconize Jesus and his belief, didn't it? It was wonderful. And so I said, so with AI, you could keep the founder alive. So I could go, right, Steve Jobs, I'm bringing Steve Jobs back, and I could have him sitting there and he could be answering a question with all of his knowledge, but relative to today.
Yeah.
So what would you do about X relative to now? Not, hey, Steve, 30 years ago, 20 years. No, it would be about today. So what I did, I said, well, what about having a conversation with myself? So I got a photograph of myself, circa 1978. We put it into AI, and I had a conversation with myself. And the point about that was we did that in 4 days.
Yeah.
Wow. It cost about, this was a 2-minute conversation. It cost about $4,000.
Yeah.
I'm amazing. And
Amazing.
that today would be even better than when we did it 4 months ago. And next year is going to be, so what you can do is just going to become stunning. So that it's going to be the power of your idea that is going to carry you forward. And how does that kind of new world take the information from your brand to apply it to my agentic AI, that person who is going to be my personal assistant?
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to respond. And it's, so it is a truly remarkable time, but I think playing with it, doing things with it is going to be fundamentally important.
Yeah, and it's to your point earlier on about the experimentation as marketers. I mean, look, I think the thing about this industry and business and the joy of what we do is being curious and the ability to experiment and try things and get it wrong, and maybe not consistently get it wrong, but like that joy.
Yeah.
And this accelerates that ability, to do all of that stuff. What, like, when you're talking to people, like, what are the barriers? Like, what is fear stopping people? Is it? Yeah.
And hey, I've always done it this way. There's a structure, there's a roadmap, that's what we do. We do that, we do that. And I think, no, I understand that. And that's why I say, well, think of yourself like a fashion brand. And here's your, what are you going to do? What's your runway show? What are you going to put out there that people go, oh, that's interesting, and explain it like that. I remember we did a wonderful spot where we were launching Microsoft's Xbox, and we had this idea of and the whole idea was play more. That was their thing. So we did a script, and it was about a woman giving birth, and the baby shoots out of the window, and it's the arc of life, and it just, and at the end of it, it goes into a grave. The baby ages, goes in. At the end of it, it just said, "Life short, play more." It just said, "No way. We're Microsoft. We can't do that." That's too. I said, "Well, you're talking to a young audience. You've got that. You've got to." And so he said, "All right. I tell you what we'll do. We'll make it, because it's actually relatively easy to make, and we'll put it online.
Yeah.
See what happens." And we did put it online. It absolutely exploded. And they then went, "Oh, that's great. Now we'll put it in cinemas." And we ran it in cinemas. So that's how we got that through. And I think that sense of experimentation, that sense of we're a company, we're making a new drug or whatever it might be. We're trying to find a cure for something. So try all these different things, see which one works, and then go with it. And think like that. Don't think like a conventional marketeer. If you think like a conventional marketeer, game's up, take up golf, hopefully you can, do gardening, learn to be a barista, or I don't know, something like that, and you'll have a job. But if you don't do that, you won't have a job.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And I'm just curious that you found fear as the thing that seems to be the blocker. Because I thought that, but it's just interesting that that's kind of the thing that
I think it's and habit also. I would, you get up in the morning, you do that, and habit to a certain extent is important. Otherwise, life is chaos.
Yeah, but it's also boring.
Well, the trouble with habit is it overwhelms everything. Just remember, it's a sort of a convenience. It's not because I get up in the morning and I put the coffee machine on and I get that out. And that's habit, and you can go, well, if I got up every morning and said, now what am I going to do? It would take me forever to have breakfast. So sometimes habit is important, but you let it dominate your life.
Who do you think is doing it well? Are you when you're looking out there, are you kind of going, like they're getting this, they're doing this well?
Do that's always a great question, that one, Connor. And I have to say, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't find great people out there doing stuff that I truly admire. I look at people who are kind of playing in a conventional way and having a bit of luck, and then so to be honest with you, I'd say I really am not sure. And I don't mean that to be clever, but there's nobody being profoundly different and showing a way forward. I remember when I was in New York. We opened the office there at the beginning of 99, and then I was there for 2.5 years. You know, you looked at how Nike were doing it, and they were doing a fantastic job back then. And I used to say to them, why aren't more people looking at the success of Nike and going, now, what are they? That's funny. They're doing something really right here. What are we doing in a similar way?
Yeah.
And I used to say to people, you know, the car manufacturing changed because everybody understood the Japanese had invented this thing called just in time, and everybody adopted it, and therefore were able to compete with Japanese cars. But here we are in the communications world, looking at somebody being hugely successful, share price going up, people talking about them, and nobody was going, now then, what lesson can we learn from that? They just looked at it, we won't do that, we'll do something else. And I think, you know, at that time too, Gap were doing some great work back in the sort of 1999,
Yeah, they were.
the early noughties, and then they lost their way. And it's kind of interesting how that happens and why it happens. There is a bigger question there, which is, do brands have a kind of life cycle? Is your job to try and extend that life cycle, or can you constantly refresh them? Some would argue you can't. Some would argue that's just the natural course of events. It's a bit like life, blah, 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 accept it. And I go, I'm not sure about it. I think that's a sense of defeatism, that I think if you stay aware, you stay kind of focused on a philosophical thought that carries you through, you can actually constantly extend the life of a brand. But you have to be aware of what's happening, what's changing, be interested, and also lead the market. You know, that's the other thing. I mean, I do love all of these things about Generation X and Generation Y and A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, you know, it is virtually all of it is bullshit.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Absolute bullshit. Invented by research companies, marketing companies to frighten clients into going, I've got to change everything because Generation X, they don't do this, and Generation Y, they're absolute rubbish. Yes, of course, technology does change things, and that hasn't. But, you know, when you go underneath and you say, what are the qualities of Generation X or Generation? And you look at they all look very similar to me. And I think I remember being 18 or whatever and thinking much the same. You know, that was my thinking about that. Was like, and you know, yes, COVID has had a profound impact on people and stuff, but that will be temporary. We'll go back to kind of being what, and we kind of become obsessed about trying to understand these people. And, you know, and I always say, I don't understand myself. How am I supposed to understand somebody I've never met?
Yeah, a big cohort of people that happen to be the same age. Yeah.
Isn't it bullshit? And I used to sometimes, and I'm being open here, I used to sit in meetings at BBH and a new client would come in and one of our team would say, of course, yes, we have consumer understanding. And I used to think, sitting behind me, you and God, it's amazing. You have consumer understanding. And I used to sort of say, well, actually, I don't think we have consumer understanding. I think we have consumer knowledge. Knowledge is more people are going on holiday, the more people are buying this car versus that car, more people are spending this amount of money on that, they're going out more, they're not. That's consumer knowledge. And that gives you a kind of sense of picture. But the idea that we have consumer understanding is one of those great myths that just because we say something doesn't mean to say it's right. and just because we say it's Generation X of this, a Generation Y of that. And I was with a great friend this morning who was talking to me. There's a great article about, there's a new group of people, they're called Normans.
Okay.
And it's where they go to, the kind of food they eat, the stuff like that. And I thought, it's great. You know, it's some journalist has done some piece on it and the kind of cafes they go to and the food. And I just thought it's a wonderful piece of kind of editorial, how relevant it is. The idea is do something that inspires people. And that way you'll drive. And that's the most assured thing you can do. If you try and chase the market, by the time you've got there, it'll have moved on.
Yeah. Inspire people is a great way to. Speaking of that, and we're at time, unfortunately, because I could go on for a lot longer. We maybe touched on it at the beginning, but do you ever reflect on the impact that you have had and still have on our industry and how you inspire people?
I don't really think. No, I'm being honest. I don't really think about it that much. Yes, I'm very proud of a lot of the work we did. Quick secret. A lot of it was also not very good. we did some things I look at it, oh my God, that was terrible. How did we do that? Oh no. But I think we did some great work because we believed in the work, we believed in ideas. BBH, we always used to say, all roads lead to the work. That's all that matters. And we cared and loved it. And we loved great work. And I think from that point of view, we did create something worth having. We didn't talk about the bottom line. Yes, we were very lucky and wonderful. I'm not going to knock that in any way at all. But if anybody ever came to us with a deal, we should get together and do, we always used to say, will it make the work better?
Right.
And if the answer was, well, not really, it might make you a lot more money. Well, we're not going to do it because all we want to do is make the work better. And that's how we'll make money. So I don't really, long answer to a very short and simple. I'm very proud of it. I love it. Yeah. And I love, I can show it to my grandchildren and say, I did this. And they'll go, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And I think that's what you should do in life. You should go, whatever you're doing, would you show it to your family and say, this is what I did. What do you think? And that's a great way of testing it, a great way of evaluating it, a great way of measuring what you've done. Would you show it to your family and say, I'm proud of this?
Amazing. And isn't that a wonderful thing to have for them to go, that's kind of cool. Like,
yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
That'll do me if I get my kids to say that. Listen, John, thank you so much. And I'm going to put in the show notes and obviously share them how people can find out more about the course, the business of creativity.
Yeah, do. Please do. Yeah. I'm on a sort of I'm now on a pulpit. I actually did give a talk from a pulpit. I thought, at last, I've done it. I'm hearing like that. But yes, please do. It's the business of creativity. And the course is called Creativity for Growth. And I'd love people on it because at the end of it, you'll come out of it, whatever, you'll come out of it feeling better.
And, the last kind of thought for me, like the easy thing for you to do would have been to do nothing. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that's and your passion for this is you could have just gone, look, I'm done. But it's just that passion to your core of this being so important and just the energy you're bringing to it is electric, and just what people are going to get out of the course is going to be amazing. So
great. I mean, I think that's what I think in life, having purpose. People say, that is one of the things that is fundamentally important. And I do feel, and not that I've invented it, I feel my purpose is to try to spread what I was able to experience, what it did for me and for other people.
Well, amazing. Well, listen, thank you so much for the time today.
Connor, lovely talking to you. Great stuff. And hope we see each other again soon. All right. Cheers.
Thanks a million.
Have a great one. Bye.
Well, I'm not really sure what's left to say after that. That was just a phenomenal interview, an opportunity to meet the wonderful John Hegarty. Really just engaging, interesting person, and his passion for what he does and for pushing the business of creativity is incredible. As I said at the end, like, he could have just said, look, you guys deal with this now. I'm off to the vineyard, but he's not. He truly believes in it, and he believes in it because he's seen it firsthand, the power of creativity to transform businesses. I hope you found it interesting and some new stuff in there that you may not have heard him talk about before. We all know the great campaigns that he's done, and we did touch on those, but hearing about things like Phileas Fogg, hearing about some of the other things and his setbacks and how they didn't set him back at all, and how he doesn't believe in learning from failures. I love that, and his views on experimentation. Look, a phenomenal interview. I did say to somebody, for anyone I think in marketing and advertising and creativity, meeting someone like John Hegarty, you know, it's like, I think if you're in music and you meet one of the Beatles, like you're just meeting one of the greatest, not just of, you know, his generation, but of like multiple generations. And yeah, just I'm really honored to have had that opportunity to spend time with one of, if not the greatest advertiser of our time. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it and feel compelled to share it with somebody else, I definitely appreciate that. As I say at all of our episodes now, it really does get harder and harder for us to reach people organically. The platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok, they all really want us to pay to play, and that just is hard when you're not backed by a large organizations like some of the other podcasts are. So this is just the passion project that it is, and I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoy tuning in, and, you know, say sharing, rating, reviewing, subscribing, any one of those things really does help new people discover That's What I Call Marketing. So listen, that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, from me, your host, Conor Byrne. Until the next episode, take care.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.